Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Audrey Dow, and I'm the Senior Vice President with the Campaign for College Opportunity. It really is my pleasure to welcome you to the official release of our new report, Shutout: The Need to Increase Access to the University of California and the California State University. Please take a moment to tell us who you are and where you're from in the chat. And we also invite you to submit questions throughout the webinar using the Q&A function. And we will do our best to answer your questions in the chat, possibly during this webinar or after the webinar on social media throughout the day. It was 7 years ago when I had a conversation with Michelle Cicados, our president, where we were discussing how much harder it was at the time to get into the UC and CSU compared to when we were high school seniors back in the 90s. We agreed that we were no smarter than students in 2014, but we had something they didn't. We are pretty much had a guaranteed spot at CSU and UC, assuming we met the minimum eligibility criteria. We talked about the opportunities that having a spot at a four-year university gave us, and how that opportunity and the degree it eventually came with changed our lives. That conversation led us to produce our first report on capacity, which was released in 2015, Access Denied. That report documented the increasingly competitive admissions environment that students find themselves in, even today, vying for a seat at the UC and CSU. It documented how students are doing everything we ask of them, yet our state continues to raise the admissions bar, such that students need to virtually be perfect, because quite simply, we have too many qualified and talented students than we have space for. What a paradox. At a time when California needs more highly educated workers and the bachelor's degree is the minimum credential for a living wage, the state continues to ration access to our four-year universities. Today, you're here to see how much has changed since our 2015 Access Denied report was released. And Shutout once again documents the real barriers both would-be freshmen and transfer students face as they pursue a four-year degree. It highlights the challenges of impaction at the CSU and the shortcomings of eligibility in the local context and the referral pool at the University of California. In Shutout, the Campaign for College Opportunity calls for bold recommendations on how to open up the doors of opportunity to the CSU and UC again, and the types of policies, practices, and investments that must be in place to ensure talented students find their rightful spot at our universities. The campaign was founded nearly 18 years ago on the very premise that all students who want to go to college and are eligible should have the opportunity to go and to succeed. Our founders believed that a movement of citizens, like all of you with us today, from the social justice, business, education communities, that we could come together and act to preserve access to college and the American dream for the next generation of students. That's why we're thrilled to have with us today a student leader who has experienced capacity challenges firsthand as a transfer student, the executive director of College Match, who works with high school students daily to navigate the complexities and competitiveness of admissions, a key legislator who chairs the Budget Subcommittee on Education, the chair of the UC Board of Regents, the chancellor of the CSU system, and Governor Newsom's chief deputy cabinet secretary. These are the individuals on the front lines of the capacity challenge and the leaders who we must hold accountable for updating our state's approach to college access. Pastor Sam Casey of Congregations Organized for Prophetic Engagement in the Inland Empire, a longstanding partner of ours, said in response to the Shutout report findings, "We cannot pretend that this moment isn't crucial for our students. Our state university leaders have the power to make sure the barriers before and during this pandemic don't keep our students locked out of a higher education. Indeed, the time for action and increasing access is now. With that, it's my pleasure to kick off this webinar and introduce Michelle Cicados, the president of the Campaign for College Opportunity.
Thank you, Audrey, and welcome everyone. I love seeing the chat fill up with representatives that care as passionately about higher education access as we do here at the campaign. Audrey's absolutely correct. We are motivated and moved every day at the Campaign for College Opportunity to ensure that more Californians can go to college, that when they do, they actually complete, and that we finally eliminate the racial and ethnic gaps that persist in California higher education. And this report has so much data and wealth of information that helps make the case for what we're not doing right in terms of expanding that access and serving talented students in California. I really want to start by thanking Colleen Moore. She was our lead researcher and author of this report. And I also want to thank my amazing research team, including Dr. Vikash Reddy, David Salman, and our research fellows who worked really hard to bring you all of this information. I have the pleasure of sharing just some of the key findings in this report, and I'm not going to spend too much time on that because I want to make sure that you get to hear from the amazing folks that are joining us this morning. But first, to kick it off, I do want to set some context. You know, in California, as in the rest of the nation, the value of a college degree continues to grow. We know that in order to even be able to live a living wage kind of job, you need some educational certificate or degree. And we also know that more and more high school students today than ever before are preparing and want that college opportunity. Before you can see that California, if you can go back one slide, Kat, California, in spite of how we have succeeded at so many things nationally and across the world, we rank pretty poorly in the number of BAs that we award. And we are projecting, based on research from the Public Policy Institute, to be 1 million degrees short. So at a time when we know an education is more important than ever before, at a time when more students are preparing for that college education, as you can see in the next slide, these two things are on a collision course. We're not doing enough in California. In this chart, you can actually see how more and more high school students in the blue line going up are preparing for college by taking and passing the A through G courses, which, as you know, in California makes you eligible for UC and CSU. About half of all California high school graduates have completed the A through G courses. In addition to completing those courses, more and more students are applying, but as you can see in this graph, the number who are admitted has only increased slightly at the University of California, and the number that have enrolled at the University of California has stayed flat over the last 2 decades. At the Cal State University system, we have seen not just an increase in the number of students that have applied to the CSU, definitely a significant increase in the last 2 decades of those who have been admitted, but only a slight increase in those that have enrolled over the past 2 decades. And we also find in our report that a very concerning process at both the University of California and the Cal State system, where students who are eligible, who could attend a University of California, are referred to a campus that they didn't apply to. And at that campus, only a slight number of students will ever choose admission to that campus. So at the UC, a perfect example is if 12,000 applicants in 2019 were put into this UC referral pool, and only 57 of those students actually enrolled in that referred campus. At the CSU, 16 of 23 CSU campuses are impacted at the freshman level, and many programs are impacted across the 23 campuses. What does that mean? Impaction means that you have more eligible students applying than you have spots for them, and so you can raise the bar for admissions. Next slide. So with that context, I want to invite Erica Rosales to join us and share her thoughts. Erica is a good friend, first-generation college student herself. She is currently the executive director at College Match LA, but served as an assistant dean of admissions at Occidental College here in LA. She has been a teacher, a principal, a counselor. She is a Garfield High School graduate who attended Wellesley and showed up on campus alone with her suitcase. She went on to earn her bachelor's degree and then a master's degree from UCLA. It's made her incredibly passionate about higher education access. Erica, I'm really interested in hearing from you. You're on the front lines working with talented students every single day to ensure that they go to college. What's your reaction to this report? And specifically, what do you recommend our college leaders do differently?
First of all, thank you so much for having me here today and for gathering so many advocates on the Zoom call. My initial reaction is thank you. Thank you for bringing light to this issue. I have been doing this work, I feel like, for a lifetime now, because like you mentioned, I'm a first-generation college student myself, and I remember applying to the UC, and like Audrey said, I remember knowing that I had a guaranteed spot if I did everything right. And I can tell you that now that I've been working with College Match for close to 16 years, and there has been a definite shift. Our students do not have that guarantee anymore. College Match works with talented, low-income students in Los Angeles. And it used to be that we could tell our students, you've done it all right. You've taken your A through G requirements. You've gotten that high GPA, but it's not enough anymore. I've had students with 4.2 GPAs who are leaders in their communities, who have gone above and beyond, been denied access to one of these institutions. And like you said, oftentimes those students are referred because they are in the top 9% of their class. But to a student, that one opportunity, when you are denied, it is so difficult to convince you that that other UC is a great opportunity. So gratefully for our students, they have us. But what if you're a first-gen student who does not have that guidance, who does not have that person at home telling you that that UC education is going to be excellent? So once again, thank you for bringing light to this. And yes, we need more spots because we have talented students who want to go to college. It's not about convincing them anymore. It's about opening up those opportunities because they are the leaders and they're going to ensure that our economy stays at the top.
Thank you, Erica, and thank you for everything you do. I want to show this graphic, which is in the report that really speaks to Erica's point and highlights what is happening in the education pipeline. So I'm going to have all of you look to the very bottom. These are ninth graders by race and ethnicity in California. Of 100 Latinx students, if you follow the orange color up, 82 graduate from high school. 36 of them will complete the A through G courses required for university admission. 16 will enroll in the University of California, 29 in the Cal State University system. Of those who, I mean, those will apply, I should have clarified. And then of those who apply, 11 will be admitted to the UC, 26 to the CSU. And in terms of who enrolls, only 4 from the first 100 will attend a University of California, and only 12 a Cal State University system. And if you go across, you see what that number is for white Californians, for Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islanders, for African Americans, and for American Indian, Native Alaskans. So those are the experiences of our students. That is the reality of what's happening in our pipeline, and very disturbing knowing that the majority ethnic group of the state is Latinx Californians. So I'd like to, let you sit with this slide for a second, and then show you a little bit more about what that looks like in terms of access to our universities on the next slide. So as you can imagine, once you looked at that pipeline picture, our first year freshman classes don't reflect California's diversity. If you look at Latinx students, the blue color is those that make up the UC freshman class, 29% are Latinx. And the red is who makes up the CSU freshman class. For the first time, the CSU is reflective of the high school graduates in our state, but you can see that the UC falls very short. This is what it looks like for white Californians. This is the freshman class at our UC and CSU for Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islanders. And on a different scale, this is what it looks like for Black Californians. We also, in the report, break down additional data on representation by campus. And so here you're looking at all 9 UC campuses, and you can see again that 53% of high school graduates identify as Latinx. That's the line bar across the top. And only UC Merced has an adequate representation of Latinx students. You can see the campuses and where they stand. If you can go back to that slide, you can see each campus and where it stands in terms of representation. I'll let you sit with that for a sec. On the next slide, you can see what it looks like for white Californians. And in this slide, you can see what it looks like for Black Californians. And in this final slide, you can see what it looks like for Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islanders. Something we're not showing you here, but I hope each of you have downloaded a copy of the report, is that we see variation in trends, not just in who applies to University of California campuses. We know that of Latinx students who complete the A through G courses, only half choose to apply to the University of California, and a much lower number who are admitted choose to enroll. We know that for Asian Americans, the number who apply is significantly higher, and the number who choose to enroll is also significantly higher. So I really want you to look at the full report. It's not possible for me to do all of this data justice, but a lot of the variation is happening by race and ethnicity that gives us insight into some of the possible solutions of the work that we can do. In the next slide, we're gonna now introduce you to Michael Shouton. He is Chair of Legislative Affairs at CSUN, an important campus in the Cal State system. But I think many of you also know that Michael has been an active leader, a transfer student himself who earned the associate degree for transfer. And Michael, I'm really glad to have had your leadership and expertise to help inform the many policy solutions that we have pushed here in California. And thank you for your advocacy to strengthen transfer through Assembly Bill 928 and Assembly Bill 1111, both by Berman, that really improved the pathway. I would love to hear from you. Can you tell us, based on your experience, what some of the admission challenges have been for you, and what you hear from other transfer students as well, given the impaction that we know we see across the Cal State University system, And specifically, could you share what you think college leaders can do and should do, given the stark data that has been raised in this report?
Definitely, definitely. First and foremost, thank you for having me. Thank you for everybody on this call as well. It means a lot to be here as well. But on point, I think, the report highlights a lot of things. We have students completing A through G at a higher rate, and where are they going? And the focus used to be, or was for a long time, we'll start them at the community college, develop a clear transfer pathway, and then get them off into the CSU and UC. And we're doing that, and we're accelerating that with AB 928, and I hope to see that. And some of the challenges were that, especially as transfer students face with impaction is per campus. So there may be, like for me as a finance major at Northridge, there were additional requirements because finance was impacted. If I decided once I got to Northridge, I wanted to switch to a different concentration, I couldn't switch back to finance, being a transfer student and be given this impaction. And so the impaction was a huge part of it, but also the transfer process, what does that look like? There's so many articulation agreements, and thankfully, and hopefully this work that comes out of the intersegmental committee under AB 928, we'll see a lot of that collaboration. And I know there's a lot of concern about the UC admissions as well, and going into the UC. And so that intersegmental committee, hope to see more collaboration there, improving and streamlining that transfer process. Students are able to set sail. But really, that impaction is a big thing, because you may need to take an extra course in a semester to meet the impaction requirements of CSUN. And then say if you want to go maybe to Fullerton, then their impaction requirements may be different, or their program may not be impacted at all. But now you're, as a student, with a full course load already, and probably at some point working if you're a community college student as well. And now you're having to add on another unit. And so that is really stressful. And then the last thing is if we're to accelerate this, if we're to accelerate transfer, and we see this reduction from 6 years to the goal of a 2-year path, we're going to need to expand room. There's not room at our current universities. We're already seeing that. And then what we're seeing is that our populations are most at risk, or our populations that need the most service are being pushed to these smaller campuses that maybe aren't as robust as the programs. And so we talk about diversifying engineering, and we talk about diversifying these STEM fields, but the programs, the spaces that we have to diversify, we're lacking. At CSUN, we're thankfully the partnership with Apple, we're opening up the global STEM center there, and that will serve as a way to really diversify our student population. But really, the impaction is going to be a huge issue, and hopefully through that articulation and those conversations through the system between CCC, California Community College, the CSU, and the UC, we'll start to see a more streamlined path, and then expanding on campuses to alleviate the impaction.
Thank you so much, Michael. And you helped position the discussion around some of the policy barriers and campus barriers that exist for students, as well as some of the solutions. And I think all of you who know the Campaign for College Opportunity know that we love data. We love to present findings like this, but we only love them to the extent that we can do something about it. And that's what we're absolutely committed to. I just want to refer to the chat really quickly, because Kamyar, you asked, what if the proportion of admission is similar regardless of ethnicity and race? And in the report, we actually document that it isn't similar. And in fact, some of the policy barriers that have been huge challenges for university access, one of them being obviously the ban on affirmative action. That's had a huge impact since the ban went into effect. I just want to share one statistic with all of you. The UC admits who are Black today remain below the level it was prior to Prop 209 passing. So more than 25 years later, the number of Black admits has still not recovered from the ban on affirmative action. And while that of Latinos is higher. That was only recently, and it's only a result of the huge demographic increase of Latinos in California as a whole. So that has been a huge challenge. Transfer access to our universities is also a barrier. We have a master plan that was incredible and innovative in the 1960s. But today it has old eligibility definitions that say only a top third of California high school students should go to college, when we know that this economy requires significantly more educated workforce than ever before. We also have unstable and unpredictable funding from the state of California. And while we've had record investments under Governor Gavin Newsom, historic investments in higher education and a prioritization of higher education policies, we obviously can't in 1 or 2 years make up for decades of disinvestment, underinvestment in higher education. And we also have had decades of use of a test that is finally being recognized for what it is, the SAT and ACT in admissions. Thankfully, historic action by the University of California Board of Regents last year to eliminate use of SAT, ACT in admissions analysis for students, a change that is long overdue, and for the decades that it was in place, absolutely hurt California students and certainly hurt access, especially for low-income and underrepresented students. We have had decades of placement of students in remedial courses that are ineffective and never get them to completion. And we have a proposal that's still under review and research at the Cal State University system to add quantitative reasoning to admissions requirements, a proposal that researchers have documented would have disparate impact on Black and Latinx enrollment in the CSU. So those are some of the existing policy barriers. Of course, there's a lot of options that I'd like to share with you and that are included in more detail in the report in terms of ensuring that we do a much better job. First and foremost, we're thrilled, again, that Governor Newsom has invested in a cradle to career data system. We're thankful that Ben Chida is here with us today. He is the leader championing this important work. We believe and recommend that the eligibility to the university system across the state move from that top third called for by the master plan to the top 40%. 40% to the CSU, the top 15% to the UC. That would expand eligibility to over 44,000 more California students per year. We know that options to serve those students have to be discussed and considered. That would include new or expanded campuses, financial incentives to get students to attend campuses that are least impacted in the northern state, establishing branch campuses for students who are place-bound, establishing a university partnership with a community college, expanding and strengthening online access for those who want that as an option. Our formal recommendations are that the state set a very specific goal that 60% of Californians should have a degree or credential by 2030. Again, that we raise eligibility to the top 40% for our universities, and that we ask our leadership, our state leaders and our governor and our college leaders to work together on a strategic 5-year plan to expand access and capacity. We believe a coordinating body in higher education that works with K-12 is necessary to help guide this. For college leaders, we are asking you all to drop use of SAT and ACT in admissions. The Cal State University is still studying that issue. We'd like to see it eliminated from admissions decisions. We also want to see the Cal State system increase its transparency around admissions decisions, around impaction. And we are thankful that we have a Chancellor Joe Castro, who joins us here today, that has been adamantly committed to closing the gaps that continue to persist for graduates and students of color in his Cal State system. I am honored to introduce this amazing panel. Again, there's so much more data in the report, and I urge you all to download it and look it over and send any questions our way. But we're honored to have an incredible panel of leaders in California. You see their faces here today. Thank you, Cecilia, for joining us and ensuring greater gender parity amongst this conversation. So with that, I'd like to introduce Assembly Member Kevin Mccarty. Many of you know him as a champion for higher education. He chairs the subcommittee on education. He has been focused on improving access for students. And Assembly Member, I know you've had a chance to review this report. We know that you have focused enormous attention on some of the basic needs and housing insecurity and housing crisis facing students as a top priority, but very much interested in hearing from you, given the findings of this report, what you and your colleagues can do to really support expanded capacity and to help close the gaps that continue to persist for students.
Okay.
Do we have Assembly Member McCarty?
Yes, I'm here. Can you see me and hear me?
We can definitely hear you, and we're going to put a pin on your video as soon as you get started. Yes.
There we go. Sorry, I'm in a hearing in the Capitol, so I have to run to find a quiet place to talk to you for a few moments. So look forward to seeing you all back in the Capitol in the near future. Is it working? You can hear and see me?
We can hear you fine.
Gotcha. I apologize. Well, first of all, I appreciate the work of the Campaign for College Opportunity and what's in here. Music to, frankly, my ears, and really that's been our agenda, my agenda for the past 7 years, chairing the Budget Committee overseeing higher education funding. And so I will make one correction of Eunice Sequeira. So it is the governor and the legislature, the co-equal branch of government that is gung-ho on expanding access for college access and affordability. And we started under Jerry Brown the last few years. We had essentially in the last 9 years, we've had tremendous news in the state budget. But you're right, during 09, 10, 11, we increased prison spending by $2 billion and cut higher education and early ed by $2 billion. So we haven't recovered from those losses. So there've been a good couple years, but we still need to do much more. But your recommendations that I saw I briefly skimmed the article today in the LA Times. I saw your social media reports. Essentially, exactly what Speaker Rendon and our budget chair Phil Ting are pushing and championing is, focusing on increasing access to higher ed, because two things. One, we need more college degrees, as you noted, to meet the jobs of today and tomorrow. We need a higher educated workforce, and two, higher education really is the ticket to a middle class, good paying job. And as you noted, the master plan, which really isn't it's not the Bible, it's not gospel here in California. It was a plan. It was never codified, adopted in state law, and so. It was just a kind of where we were in time in 1960, and in 2021, 22, it's very different. We know that you need more education to require to focus on what you need in this economy, and I think people get it loud and clear that the number of people that are attending high school in California is declining, but the number of students that are graduating and are A through G ready and college ready is through the roof. And that's why, we've had a major focus to expand enrollment at UC and CSU. And I know that Chair Ting and I are meeting with the UC Chancellor Drake, President Drake, and Chancellor Castro to focus on goals for 2030. So this, frankly, your report just boosts our efforts. We released our Assembly blueprint this past week for our next year's budget. The Senate just did theirs, and expanding higher ed access is key and part of it. I'll focus first on UC. I know that UC just came out and focused on having a 20,000 increase by 2030. We think that's too low. We're gonna go for, you know, 30,000 increase at the minimum by 2030. This past year, we increased enrollment at UC by about 6,500 students. And so, you know, we think we could, you know, put a marker down for 2,500 per year annually for the next 8 years by 2030 and get to that 30,000 number. We think we're focusing on a similar type push at CSU as well. So that's one piece of the puzzle, is just having slots and seats. There's two other pieces that I'm working on. One's related to housing and one's related to college costs. On housing, we need more student housing on campuses to do two things. To one, deal with the pressure that students on campus are currently facing with housing instability. You know, research shows if you live near campus, you're more likely to graduate within 4 years. And I know that's music to the ears of Mr. Castro, what we're trying to do at CSU. And people graduating in a quicker period of time means less debt for them and means more space to enroll more people in the CSU. So that helps us with that goal. Plus, on some of the marquee UC campuses, and plus a little bit about a couple CSU campuses, we know that we really can't enroll many more people unless we build more student housing, especially with the pushback from local government. So we're at this unique era in our state budget where we have this huge infusion of one-time money. We've all been reading about this whole thing with the GAN policy. So there is a window here for us to put more money into student housing. So last year I introduced a bill and it was kind of parlayed into the budget with $2 billion for student housing. So I'm going to come back and double up again and put a proposal in for $5 billion for a revolving fund for UC and CSU to have a zero interest revolving fund to build much needed housing at UC and CSU campuses, which would, again, deal with the current needs of students, plus enable us to expand as your report focuses on enrollment expansion. And then lastly, we do know that you know, college affordability and financial aid is a key piece. So many of our students get Cal Grant, get Pell Grant, don't really have tuition issues, but it's the non-housing costs. So Jose Medina, Connie Leyva, and John Laird and I worked on a bill last year, which was unfortunately vetoed by the governor. But I'm going to focus on, don't worry, Ben, we'll be focusing on the glass half full or 2/3 full. So we got a little over half of that funded in the budget. We put $1 billion more for financial aid. Now Cal Grant is an entitlement for community college transfer students. We're revamping the middle class scholarship to focus on the non-tuition costs. And our goal is really having debt-free college in California, where students can get financial aid, get their tuition paid for, get additional non-tuition grants, and literally graduate with zero debt in California. And so we're on our way. We're going to come back and put that again in the budget this year and work on the follow-up legislation as well. So this is a time that we are I steal the words of President Biden, we're building back from this economy, but it wasn't good 3 years ago for so many people trying to get ahead in higher education. So we're looking to build back different, build back better. And so that includes really stepping up and expanding higher education access for everybody in California. And whether or not we have a master plan or change that to 60%, we can work on that. But the goals of that, 100% in alignment. And look forward to working with you, and thank you for raising these important issues.
Thank you, Assembly Member, for your leadership, for everything you do. We know that we pulled you from a hearing, so thank you for prioritizing education and the future access and opportunity for so many of our students. I'm glad to hear you say that you're talking about goals and are committed to expanding access. So I know we'll continue to work with you. Next, I'd really love to introduce a good friend, an incredible leader, the new chancellor, not new anymore, but because of the pandemic, it still feels new, Chancellor Joe Castro, who I had the honor of actually visiting in person with yesterday morning. Chancellor Castro, thank you for being with us today. I know you've always been committed to access and issues of equity And while your predecessors laid the foundation for the graduation initiative, you are really taking it to the next level, focusing on ensuring not just broader access to the Cal State, but ensuring that all students graduate and that we eliminate the gaps that persist, and in some cases that have grown, right, between white graduates and Latinx and Black graduates in your system. So I'd love for you to respond to the report. You know, there's a lot in there around how it has gotten increasingly hard to get into the CSU, how impaction is being used to raise the bar on admissions for students. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that, and also if you can tackle the question that we talked about yesterday, SAT and ACT, what role does it have in the CSU? What's the future of that?
Sure. Well, good morning, and it's nice to see you a second day in a row, Michelle. Thank you for including me, and I just want to commend you and your colleagues for a report that I think is very important for California. It raises awareness about the challenges that we face in terms of authentic access for our underrepresented and other students. And I want everybody to know that the CSU is committed to providing access to students from all backgrounds across California. The good news is that even today, 90% of the California freshmen who apply to a CSU campus get in, and about 89% of transfer students. However, that's not 100%, and we know that in some parts of California, it's harder to gain access than in other parts. And so many of our students are place committed, so that means that they can't necessarily go to another part of the state. Now, having said that, impaction is a tool of last resort for us because of our commitment to access, and it really comes about only when there aren't enough resources at a campus to effectively serve our students. And what I'm seeing now as chancellor is actually many campuses are going through a process of moving away from impaction. And in fact, campuses in the north from Humboldt State, Humboldt, Chico, Sonoma, Maritime, San Francisco, and East Bay all have capacity to grow for now in terms of serving our students. The issues down in the Central Valley and in Southern California, I see as being much more challenging. And I want to thank the governor's office, Ben and the governor and others, as well as Assemblyman Mccarty and his colleagues for their commitment to grow enrollments in the CSU. Over 9,000 new enrollments would be in this budget, hopefully. And we already have been working on a plan to strategically allocate them to the campuses that need them the most, where the demand is higher, and where we can have an opportunity to serve these students who have had trouble getting in to the campus that they want to attend. So places like San Diego and San Luis Obispo would receive disproportionately higher numbers of the new enrollment, but also places like Fresno and Bakersfield and Dominguez Hills and Fullerton and Northridge, places where we know there needs to be greater access. So that's one very important strategy. The other one, as you mentioned, GI 2025, Michelle, so important because as these investments, again, have come from the state to help us increase graduation rates and eliminate equity gaps, that enables us to be even more accessible to accommodate more students. So it's both enhancing our enrollment, but helping us to serve our students so they graduate faster, not cutting any corners, but faster. And that enables us to serve more students. And then finally, you asked me about the ACT and SAT. Our Admissions Advisory Council has approved the discontinuation of that. And the next step is to go to the Board of Trustees in January for an information item. and then in March for full action to discontinue both the ACT and the SAT in our admissions decisions. And I'm very supportive of that. And then finally on quantitative reasoning, we're awaiting this study, and then we'll have a conversation together. But I just want folks to know that I am not interested as chancellor to make it harder for students to get in to the CSU. So we will look at this report and figure out together what the next steps are. Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor Castro, and everyone. I think you can hear the loud applause if folks were not on mute. The amazing decision that will hopefully be forthcoming to increase equitable access to the Cal State system. Now I'm thrilled to turn it over to UC Regent Cecilia Estelano. She currently chairs the Board of Regents. Also had the pleasure of spending some time Sunday morning with her. So this has been a good week for me. Cecilia, we know that this has been a #1 issue for you. You have pushed the University of California to commit to 20,000 additional slots for university students. And I know that you deeply care about equitable access to the university as a graduate yourself. So I'm thrilled to hear your reactions to the report and what else you think can be done.
Great. Thank you, Michelle. And let me also thank you for the report. I think it's coming at such a great time. I was delighted to see it come out and to really push this issue with great data, great historical data, and a comprehensive approach to this. So I applaud it, and I look forward to getting it out to everybody. So you're right. Since I took over as chair of the UC Board of Regents in July, this has been my #1 priority. And the good news is I have had a wonderful partner in President Michael Drake at UC, who rallied everybody around and gathered the chancellors to create a working group to come up with a plan to add 20,000 additional slots by 2030. And I hear Assemblymember Mccarty saying that's not enough. It's good, but it's not enough. And his goal for 30,000. I think we can probably do more than 20,000. I know that President Drake never wants to promise something that he can't deliver, and I appreciate that approach. But I will tell you that the most important thing about this is having a specific and steady, consistent source of funding so that we are doing this in a thoughtful, comprehensive way. We can't just flip a switch. Every time we add growth for students, we have to add staff and faculty. And it's also more than just undergraduates. We almost never talk about the graduate students at UC, but the graduate students at UC that really make it that level of excellence. They are the students that then go on to become part of the professoriate, who become the faculty for all 3 segments in this state. Community colleges and Cal State faculty overwhelmingly come from the UCs. So we are the feeder of the ecosystem when it comes to faculty. And it is graduate students who teach many sections. It is graduate students who go on to become great leaders in their professions and also to become great scholars, entrepreneurs. So I never want to lose that balance. And it's graduate students that also create that ecosystem of learning and growth that our undergraduates benefit from so much. So I just wanted to make that point. So just a couple of things I want to say about this. I think we can get to 20,000 kind of using the regular methods, but it's not a one size fits all. Your report and some of the data you showed on the tables you showed today shows that we have particular campuses that are really struggling, that really have a hard time growing for a variety of reasons. So we need to have a variety of methods to grow enrollment at UC. Some of that may be better use of summer session, reducing time to degree, many of those aspects, right? But it's also going to be doing things like sharing facilities at other places, coming up with branch campuses. And I'll give you 2 examples that are terrific, right? One is what UC Berkeley has been doing around Moffett Air Station, where we've entered into a long-term lease with NASA to take this former NASA facility, and it's going to become the centerpiece of aeronautics, urban air mobility, aerospace in California, and I'm going to say the world. That's a long-term project. It also includes housing. Again, thank you, Assemblymember Mccarty, for your leadership and understanding that housing is pivotal for us to grow enrollment. So it's going to have this amazing campus that's also going to spin out all kinds of economic activity and benefits for the surrounding communities. And UC Santa Cruz, another campus that has a very difficult time growing for a variety of reasons. You have the chancellor there really doubling down on working on its sort of branch campus so that it can offer things like degrees in gaming that are very popular and actually quite lucrative in this environment. So, but we need to do other things. And I'm particularly keen on us partnering with the other segments, with Cal State, with community colleges, where they may have additional capacity, where we might be able to share facilities, where we might have joint degree programs, where we might do programs where somebody can access all these different segments at a regional educational hub. So the last piece I'll say about that is, this is an idea around taking university education, which truly is the thing that distinguishes California from all over other states, is that we invested in our people a couple of generations ago. We made that investment and we were consistent about it. Then we fell on hard times and we failed to keep up with that investment and failed to meet the needs of the economy. Now, more recently, we've seen increased investments, and I applaud Governor Newsom, the legislature, Governor Brown before him, in doubling down on the investment in education. We're in a different phase now. We need to have education be the anchor and the hub for economic vitality. So I would really like to see us take a look at places that don't have access to a UC, places like the North, even parts of the Central Valley. The Inland Empire could use more access, Imperial County. What if we were to take some dying and dead regional shopping malls and actually say to a joint developer and say, look, we'll become the anchor for you redeveloping this space and turning it into an educational hub where somebody from the local community can access a community college, Cal State, and UC faculty, and use what we've learned about remote learning and apply it to these types of places. If we did that in a place like Redding, you would see dynamic economic growth within 20 years or less. We've already seen it at Merced. We can do it. We can do it in a way that is climate friendly, as well as sensitive to the needs of the community. So I'll stop there and just to say, thank you for the report. We need to do more to expand seats, but we have to do it comprehensively, thoughtfully. We have to build that housing that Assemblymember Mccarty is talking about. And we have to do this together as segments, working together to meet all the needs of Californians. And with that, I'll let you go on to the next panelist.
Thank you so much to our UC Regent Chair, Cecilia Stellano. I think that's a perfect baton pass to you, Ben Chida. The governor has made historic investments in higher education, historic support for financial aid, for transfer, and put together a task force to talk about this issue, how to recover in higher education with equity. So we'd love to hear more from you. We also heard last year or earlier this year that there was a proposal to set a goal that's even more ambitious than our goal of 60% to 70%. So would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And hi, everybody. And just adding my thanks, and congratulations on the report. It's super helpful. Just to start, Michael's remarks about access for transfer students made me think of this. And I just want to share something a bit more personal, which is that it's not an exaggeration that access to public universities saved my life. I dropped out of high school, and like many students right now, struggled with mental health issues and trying to envision a future for myself. I went to community college for 5 years and was lucky enough to transfer into a UC, and it literally keeps me up at night that others can't right now. So just to answer the question now, as this conversation demonstrates, what's awesome is there's really little debate about the what and the why. The hard work is really for us to roll up our sleeves and to figure out the how. So since the governor talked about the degree attainment back in his budget presentation last May, we've been working with UC, CSUs, the community colleges, our private nonprofits, and so many others to kind of figure out how do we accomplish this in a thoughtful, equity-centered way. And as you noted, we have the task force and many other venues through which we are having this conversation. And I hope you all can sense it, but it's really an incredible moment. There's never been more energy. There's never been more collaboration across segments and into the K-12s and into workforce. It is truly, truly a cool moment. And I hope that that we can leverage that and actually make use of it. So I just want to give you a little peek into the how we're thinking about this. So what are some of the things we're focused on? Reinvestment and stable funding. So like you said, it's hopefully evident where our priorities lie. We included $47.1 billion in higher education investments last year. And we're also mindful that, as this report notes, of the boom and bust sort of nature of this funding. And so what we've been working on is trying to figure out, how do we solve for this on a multi-year time horizon? How do we enable our partners to truly plan and execute on this shared vision? Number two is expanding capacity and closing equity gaps. So we want to obviously open more doors to more people into our UCs and to our CSUs, including our campuses where our students want to go to most. And just as important as capacity is that it's not enough to enroll students of color, but we also have to support them to graduate and to get a job. Third, a big focus for us has been connection to the workforce. So we recognize that for the lived reality of a lot of graduates, the relevancy of the degrees is at least as important as the number of degrees. So we want more pathways to high quality jobs, and we want to channel our state's most important resource, our people, to our hardest challenges. So while a JOB is important, it's more than that. It's about helping students find and make meaning for themselves, to figure out how they're going to provide for their families, how they contribute to their communities, how they serve their fellow people, how they are part of the big solutions to our big problems that are facing us all and giving us a lot of anxiety. So, those questions aren't either or. If you think about it, as Cecilia noted, there's the worker seeking a job in the climate sector can be assured of steady employment, but also can contribute to our, region's economic future, but also can help tackle the collective climate crisis, all at once. These are not, either ors here, but these are both ands. So again, trying to create these pathways as best as we can, is a real priority for us. And lastly is the connection to K-12. So as the report notes, it's not just about what happens after students graduate, but also what happens before. So last year, we worked with the legislature to make a $123.9 billion investment in our K-12 system. And we're going to continue not only investing, but also restructuring. And we've got a lot moving in this space right now. As you noted, Michelle, earlier, we've made awesome progress on data. And just yesterday, we actually hired our first executive director of the Cradle to Career data system. And so this is going to enable future reports like this one to dig in even deeper into root causes. And also it's going to help us build tools that actually take the onus off our young people and our families to navigate our often confusing systems. And so, this is sort of a peek into some of the work that we're really, really focused in on and drilling down into. And we're super excited to continue the conversation, especially as the governor rolls out his January budget proposal and we start working with all of our partners to figure out how to land this thing.
Thank you so much, Ben. And we're super fortunate to have someone with your experience and, there in the office to help inform these decisions. And you talked about all the things that matter: a shared vision, expanding access to campuses with high demand, which Chancellor Castro also raised, improving graduation rates, which we all agree has to be part of the goal, and connecting to workforce. I think for all of us who are first in our families to go to college, yes, of course, the experience of being there was important, but it was of making sure we could get a job immediately, right, to pay the bills. I want to turn it over now to Thomas Saenz, the President and General Counsel for the Mexican American Legal Defense and Educational Fund, a co-founding organization of the Campaign for College Opportunity. I've been fortunate to have Tom serve as my board chair for many years. He recently stepped down from that role, but continues to be on the board. Thanks. I'm grateful for that. Tom, can you speak as we reflect on some of these barriers that we talked about? And specifically, I know me and you have had a lot of conversation about the impact of Prop 209. And you and I and several of us on this call fought to pass Prop 16. Unfortunately, it did not pass in November. To reverse the repeal on affirmative action in university admissions. But you and I have also talked about all the things that we could do in spite of Prop 209. So I really wanted to give you an opportunity to speak to that, especially given the continued underrepresentation of Black and Latinx students in higher ed.
Sure. Well, thank you, Michelle. And I want to thank all of the panelists for centering equity in this ongoing discussion about increasing access and accessibility. It's critical. The population of California is such that we cannot hope to continue to thrive unless we address the equity gaps that we continue to face. It's not just equity of access, it's equity of outcome as well. We won't have the workforce we need if we don't begin to address these huge gaps in not just admissions, but completion of higher education in our public systems for our growing Black and Brown communities. We cannot expect California to achieve what it needs to without adequate representation of all the communities that comprise the beautiful state that we are. It's certainly true that 26 years ago with Proposition 209, voters in California, and I have to say white voters in California, because supermajorities of Black, Latino, and Asian Americans voted against Proposition 209. But Proposition 209 set up serious barriers to access and fairness in access to the University of California in particular. But the even greater harm dealt us by Proposition 209 is decentering equity considerations. For many, many years, there was a refusal to discuss issues of equity, particularly race equity, in this state because of Proposition 209, as though somehow the elimination of race-conscious admissions meant that we couldn't even talk about the increasing gaps in access and completion for minority populations. Fortunately, in the last few years, we've seen that break down. And with the UC, congratulations to the regents and to our regents chair on this panel, the UC revisiting the use of standardized tests was an important, critical first step in analyzing the criteria that we use for unjustified discriminatory effects and eliminating those that can't be justified and have discriminatory effects. Now, under Chancellor Castro, the CSU system is moving in the same direction, and that is an incredible change from the last 26 years when we have been embarrassed, reluctant, prohibited by bad advice from legal counsel from having this kind of discussion. And to answer your question, that's what we need more of. We need to recognize that too many of us continue to labor under the myth, and it is a myth, that somehow the criteria that have been developed over years and years to determine who is admitted in selective institutions represent merit. In fact, there's precious little data to suggest that any of those criteria actually relate to merit or who's earned, quote unquote, the opportunity to access flagship campuses in either the UC or the CSU. So standardized tests are that's just the beginning. We need to reverse the ideology, the inherited ideology of Prop 209, and focus on evaluating very carefully with good data, good analysis, all of the criteria that we use. Even some of the criteria that have been introduced in more recent years with a design toward greater quote unquote equity for some, like weighted GPAs, in fact, can have discriminatory effects when they don't take account of differential access, even access within a particular high school, for example, to those higher level courses that get you the weighted grade point average. So we need to revisit all of these criteria, whether it's used at the UC or used at impacted campuses or majors at the CSU, and make sure that we are determining if there are discriminatory effects. And if there are, determining whether we still need to use those criteria like standardized tests, or if we can find criteria different without the discriminatory effects that serve the same needs that those serve. So I think we are seeing the beginning of a tremendously important conversation about equity and accessibility that has to go along with all these tremendously powerful initiatives to expand access overall to our UC and CSU campuses.
Thank you so much, Tom. Thank you, Cecilia, Joe, Ben. Thank you for joining us. We showed a small preview of the enormous amount of data in a very rich report again, and focused the conversation thoughtfully on solutions and what we can do. And I think each of you give me a ton of hope. I want to turn it over to close us out today to our board chair, the amazing Estela Ben-Simon, the founding director of the Center for Urban Education at USC. Estela, this is your life's work, equity in higher education. And I also just want to comment on the activity in the chat from Bell Hooks Liberation and connections that are happening there. It just definitely leaves me really inspired as we close this out. Thank you all for joining us again. Estela, turning it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Before I thank all of our great panelists, I do want to say something about the chat. I feel that it shows policy making by the people who are most impacted by the findings in this report. So I do hope that we will keep the chat because there are many excellent ideas in it. The second thing I wanted to say is that I was really struck by those 20,000 new spaces in the UC system. And I want to say, echoing what Tom just said, those are resources, and how those resources are distributed matter a great deal. And I hope that when that is happening, that this report will be right there guiding the distribution of those 20,000 new slots, or maybe more of those. So with that, I want to say that I am proud to be the chair of an organization that for 18 years has been monitoring that the master plan in higher education in California, which has always been touted as a model for opportunity, that it doesn't act as a model for selectivity, exclusivity, and elitism. So with that, what I would like to say is that this, often reports can be very exciting in the very moment, as it is right now. But I do hope that we will keep this report next to all of us as we are making decisions that impact the students who we have shown in this report to be underserved. And I am confident that we will be able to do that because the leaders that we have with us today, starting out with Erica Rosales, Michael Shouton, Chancellor Castro, Assemblymember Mccarty, Ben Cheatham, UC Region Chair Cecilia Stolano, and Tom, we can actually make this report become a driver of racial equity. So I thank all of you. And finally, I do want to give a shout out to Colleen Moore, who led the research for this report, for this amazing report, as well as Vikash Reddy, who is our Director of Research at the campaign. So thank you, over 200 of you who joined us today, and we look forward to continuing to work with you on behalf of equity in California's higher education system. Thank you.